The summer of 2025 will remain a decisive turning point in the history of Canadian-American relations. The G7 summit in Alberta, far from being a mere diplomatic ritual, revealed an unprecedented rift between two historic partners. We saw it on video. The second Trump presidency, marked by an aggressive return to protectionism and America First rhetoric, put Ottawa on the defensive. Canada, long seen as Washington's model partner, now has to juggle between resistance, adaptation, and seeking new partners. While the trade war, the fentanyl crisis, and the issue of sovereignty are brutally redefining the North American order. Since early 2025, Canada, traditionally discreet given its geography and its peaceful and accommodating policy in North America, is returning to the geopolitical game. It remains to be seen whether it will manage to take on the United States. The current crisis has turned to its advantage. Today, borders are no longer drawn only on maps, but also in the digital world. Whether it's between Canada and the United States, in Europe, or in the Middle East, information, cybersecurity, and data control have become levers of strategic influence. Blocking websites, digital surveillance, cyber attacks, navigating freely and safely is more of an issue than ever. That's where NordVPN comes in, much more than just a tool to change your location or access geo-restricted content from your device. NordVPN safeguards your online activity as digital power struggles intensify. Thanks to its threat protection, NordVPN actively defends you against malware, trackers, and malicious sites, even when the VPN is turned off. Constant security designed for everyone who stays informed, works, or simply browses in an increasingly tense digital ecosystem. The NordVPN Plus subscription also includes NordPass, an advanced password manager. It generates, stores, and secures your credentials while alerting you if your data has leaked. An essential asset in the face of rising cyber threats. Add to that end-to-end encryption and a strict no-logs policy. Protects up to 10 devices at once, plus a kill switch that disconnects the internet if VPN drops. See the link in the description. Get 4 months free on the 2-year subscription, which comes out to only about €3 per month with a 30-day money-back guarantee. I made a video 5 months ago that already made an impression, since the challenges in Canada, like in many other countries, are significant. Since the beginning of 2025, the relationship between Ottawa and Washington has entered a phase of open confrontation. President Trump, staying true to his hardline stance, plans to impose a 35% tariff on all Canadian products exported to the United States starting August 1, 2025. One of the highest rates ever applied between the two countries. This decision comes in addition to tariffs already targeting strategic sectors such as steel, aluminum, and automobiles. And it is part of a strategy aimed at forcing Canada to give in on several sensitive issues, including border security and security more broadly. The impact of these measures is significant, and not just for Canadians. According to the Budget Lab at Yale University, the average effective tariff rate paid by American consumers on Canadian products now reaches 17.6%. This is a record high in nearly a century. For Canada, the drop in exports to the United States is accelerating, worsening the trade deficit, and weakening entire sectors ranging from agri-food to high technology. The impact on Canadians is significant. The share of Canadian exports going to the United States fell to 68% in May 2025, compared to an average of 76% in 2024, according to Statistics Canada. These few percentage points also mean a growing number of job losses. Ontario, the economic and financial engine of Canada, could lose more than 68,000 jobs as early as 2025 due to American tariffs and Canadian countermeasures. This is happening in a context, as we have seen, where the unemployment curve continues to rise. Purchasing power is eroding, and foreign investors are slowing down in the face of uncertainty. In response, Ottawa has imposed 25% tariffs on 30 billion Canadian dollars worth of American imports, with the threat of raising this amount to 150 billion Canadian dollars in the coming weeks. This retaliation strategy is, it must be said, limited by the size of the Canadian economy compared to the American giants. But Ottawa's goal is to target sensitive sectors: agriculture, manufactured goods, and certain consumer products. However, Canada is also realistic. The government of the new Prime Minister Carney, for example, canceled the tax on digital services, a conciliatory gesture aimed at encouraging the resumption of trade negotiations by the July 21, 2025 deadline, just a few days after this video. The trade war is not limited to just the exchange of numbers. It has a direct impact on the daily lives of citizens. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce, like many American lawmakers, denounces this tariff escalation that harms businesses and workers on both sides of the border. Tourist flows are collapsing, supply chains are disrupted, and confidence in the stability of the North American partner is seriously undermined. However, any business relationship is above all based on trust. Among the justifications put forward by the Trump administration for taking a tougher stance toward Ottawa, the fight against fentanyl trafficking occupies a central place. The American president accuses Canada of being lax in controlling its southern border, claiming that the country has become a hub for the transit of these synthetic drugs to the United States. This rhetoric was already present during his first term and intensified in 2025 as the opioid crisis continues to devastate many regions of the United States. The most recent data show a continued increase in fentanyl seizures at the Canada-US border since early 2024, with an increase of nearly 18% over the past 12 months, according to U.S. Border Services. However, it should be noted that according to U.S. Customs and Border Protection, less than 1% of the fentanyl seized at U.S. borders comes from Canada. The vast majority, over 98%, enters through the Mexican border. Mexico remains the dominant player, with industrial-scale labs and direct import channels from China. The real problem with fentanyl in Canada is the domestic market, since Canada has gone from being an importing country to a producing country. The opioid crisis is also devastating for Canadians. Some provinces have more than 50 deaths per 100,000 inhabitants, a rate as high as the most affected states in the United States. In response to American pressure, Canada has launched a series of initiatives, increasing customs staff, investing in the detection of suspicious shipments, awareness campaigns, and increased cooperation with the American DEA. The Carney government has also proposed the creation of a binational task force dedicated to fighting fentanyl. But distrust persists in Washington, which, as always, demands quick and tangible results. In summary, fentanyl is wreaking havoc both in the United States and in Canada, to the point of becoming a lever used by Washington for reasons of domestic politics or trade negotiations. Obviously, the current geopolitical crisis, which has been ongoing for several months, acts as a wake-up call for Canada, making it aware of its excessive dependence on the American market. But Canada also has its strengths. As early as March 2025, Ottawa launched a broad economic diversification plan with 3 pillars: developing interprovincial trade, modernizing infrastructure, and promoting future-oriented sectors such as critical minerals and green technologies. The extraction and processing of critical minerals such as lithium, nickel, cobalt, graphite, and rare earth elements have become absolute priorities for Ottawa. These resources, essential for energy transition technologies, batteries, semiconductors, and defense systems, are in growing global demand amid geoeconomic tensions surrounding supply chains. This is Canada's strength. It has one of the largest reserves of critical minerals in the Western world, which it is able to extract and, most importantly, process locally. At a time when 80% of the world's processing capacity is concentrated in China, Canada is positioning itself as a preferred alternative for any power seeking to diversify its supplies. It is already the 5th largest producer of nickel in the world and a key player in refined cobalt. To boost exploration and attract investment, the federal government has extended the mineral exploration tax credit until 2027. The goal is to bring about a new generation of projects in strategic areas, such as the Ring of Fire in northern Ontario. This region, rich in chromite, nickel, and rare earths, is considered a major lever for re-industrialization, although it is still the subject of complex negotiations with First Nations. But the challenge is also to build a true national value chain, from the ground to the export of finished products. This involves creating local processing capacities, manufacturing components for batteries and clean technologies, as well as consolidating an entire high-tech industrial ecosystem. For example, this is reflected in the development of a lithium processing hub in Bécancour, Quebec, a rare earth refining program in the Northwest Territories, and ongoing industrial partnerships with South Korea and Japan in the field of advanced materials for batteries. In the context of a trade war with the United States, geographic diversification of exports becomes a strategic necessity. And that works out well. Canada has both an Atlantic and a Pacific coast and is therefore seeking to establish new trade flows to Europe and Asia. To achieve this, the government is modernizing and strengthening logistics infrastructure. The expansion of the deepwater port of Churchill aims to provide competitive access to Northern Europe and Asia via the Arctic, against the backdrop of melting ice and the opening of new shipping routes. There is also the expansion of the Trans Mountain Pipeline, although focused on hydrocarbons, which also significantly increases shipping capacity to the ports of British Columbia, which will handle exports to Asia. The mining sector is not just a safe haven for the Canadian economy in the face of trade turbulence. It also carries Canada's geopolitical ambitions to become a pivotal power capable of securing critical supply chains while strengthening its own economic and strategic autonomy in a fractured world. In the energy sector as well, self-sufficiency and national security now take precedence over environmental considerations. New pipeline and energy corridor projects are being considered, despite opposition from environmentalists. The long-term goal is to reduce the share of energy exports to the United States, which account for more than 95% of the volume, and to strengthen the sector's resilience to external shocks. The year 2025 will no doubt remain a decisive turning point in the contemporary history of Canada. The country was suddenly brought back to a reality that many in Ottawa and elsewhere preferred to ignore. Geopolitics is not a fixed backdrop, but a constant, sometimes brutal movement in which one must know how to adapt, resist, transform, and bounce back. The year of Donald Trump's second term may have mainly put an end to a kind of Canadian strategic lethargy, faced with punitive tariffs, increasing security tensions, symbolic threats of annexation, and a deep rethinking of the North American partnership. Canada, if it wants to continue to exist, has no choice but to take a hard look at itself. And it has begun timidly but firmly to reshape its stance. On the military front, the break is just as clear. Ottawa, long content with its dependence on American security umbrellas, is now firmly committing to the path of long-term self-reliance. Defense spending should therefore reach 2% of GDP by 2030. The Arctic, once peripheral, is now becoming central to Canada's ambitions, both to assert its rights over the Northwest Passage, to exploit the strategic resources it contains, and to position itself as a responsible actor within an increasingly contested global space. This strategic awakening is not only expressed in military terms. As we have seen, it also affects the economy, specifically the exploitation of its natural resources and the diversification of its partners by relying on its geography. This repositioning is happening painfully. The trade war has already cost tens of thousands of jobs. Export losses to the United States are massive. Rising costs and prices are weakening households, and social tensions are increasing. But this can also be seen as the cost of freeing oneself from a dangerous dependency. In this period of open hostility, the American temptation to reduce Canada to a mere satellite or to bend it to its own national interests has never been so palpable. This provocation may have revived the Canadian instinct for sovereignty that many believed was gone. Within society, debates about national identity, Canada's place in the world, and the need for economic, strategic, and diplomatic diversification are multiplying. The younger generations, in particular, are demanding a country capable of resisting external pressures, taking firm positions, and charting its own course without rejecting its American neighbor. Ultimately, what the current crisis reveals is not only the fragility of the Canadian model, which has long been centered on North America and completely dependent on, even economically and culturally absorbed by, its American neighbor. Even better, it reveals a long underutilized geopolitical potential, supported by a wealth of resources unmatched in the developed world, and an ability to act as a mediator in a divided world. Geopolitics at its core, and as you see in every video on Terabellum, is not just a cynical game of power politics. It's also the art of turning vulnerability into strength, a shock into an opportunity, and dependence into autonomy. And it's still too early to say whether Canada might become a balancing power on a global scale. But one thing is certain, it is no longer just a passive spectator of history. On the contrary, it has once again become an active player with real leverage. Did the United States, by believing they could dominate it, inadvertently give it back its own sense of identity? I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into Canada's geopolitical challenges. And you, how do you imagine Canada's future in this new global game? Quiet resilience or the emergence of a new power? Did Trump ultimately have a positive effect on Canada or not at all? Let us know in the comments, especially since a good part of our audience is directly affected and also watches us from this country. Your analyses, your questions, or even your disagreements are at the heart of the debate, so don't hesitate to react. Share this video with those around you and like it to support us. And besides, it's free. Thanks again to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. To learn more, click on the link in the pinned comment of this video or in the description. Also, consider subscribing so you don't miss any upcoming analyses on the major transformations of today's world. Thank you to the YouTube members who support us financially. This was Quentin for Terabellum.